Hi, everybody. My name is Sarah Millar. I'm excited to be here on behalf of Diversity VC to share our second installment of the Diversity in U.S. Startups report in partnership with CEO and RateMyInvestor. We first produced this report 2 years ago, and we were aiming to establish a benchmark for the industry that we could compare ourselves against and measure progress. And today we're sharing that progress, which has been admittedly slow, but in the right direction. We're incredibly lucky to be joined by three fantastic panelists who are going to share some of their insights and recommendations for how we can continue to move forward and probably more importantly, accelerate that pace. I do want to take the time to just mention two things from the Diversity VC side that we have been working on that you can engage with to accelerate that pace as well. The first is our Diversity VC standard. We know that measurement and accountability in terms of diversity and inclusion is fundamental for knowing where we're starting and where we need to go. And so the Diversity VC standard is an assessment and certification product for venture capital funds to measure their policies and practices and procedures against the industry and put into place the best practices of DEI. And I'll be sharing some of the information for that in the chat function. We also know that when you have more diverse investors, you make more diverse investments. And so a couple of years ago, we started the Future VC program, which is an internship program placing underrepresented populations into internships with leading VC funds. So if anybody in the audience is interested in getting more information on either of those things, I'll be sharing the links to each of those, and feel free to reach out if you're interested in learning more. But with that, I'm going to pass it off to Aisling from CEO to give her short introduction.
Thank you, Sarah, and hi, everyone. Welcome to this important discussion on diversity in U.S. startups. My name is Aisling Carlson, and I'm from the RateMyInvestor powered by CEO team. For those that don't know RateMyInvestor, we are a vetted review platform that is restoring balance to the startup ecosystem by leveling the playing field between investors and founders. And with our partners, Diversity VC, as you know, we started this report, as Sarah just mentioned, in 2019, and were shocked but not surprised by the findings. To sum it up, as an industry, we must do more to enable true equality of opportunity for founders. Yes, because we have a moral imperative to do so, but if that doesn't float your boat, then simply because it just makes good business sense to do so. And we should say that the inequity we find in our industry isn't unique to venture. Sadly, many industries continue to operate in ways that perpetuate the status quo. It can be the seemingly innocuous practices, such as relying on warm introductions to create deal flow, that can have such insidious effects. In this case, continuing to elevate those that have the right background and network to get introductions. And what we're striving towards through creating this report is the sharing of knowledge and hard data about the state of the US venture landscape. But let's not kid ourselves, sharing knowledge is only the first step. So if you'd like to learn more about what we're doing to create change in our space and how we can work together, then please do get in touch after this. But now it's my great pleasure to turn it over to the panel for a discussion followed by a Q&A. We're honored to have this stellar lineup moderated by Ariel Pardes. So Ariel is a senior writer at Wired, where she covers startups, Silicon Valley, and the business of technology. Her work has taken her from Sand Hill Road to Capitol Hill to report on the ways in which technology has disrupted our social relationships, political expectations, and daily life. Ariel, over to you.
Thank you so much for the lovely introduction, and thank you to everyone who's joining us remotely today. I know it's a big ask to get you to spend an hour with us on screen, so we do appreciate that. I cannot wait to dive into this conversation with our incredible panelists. Today we'll be talking about who gets funded, who gets left out, and how future investments can reflect a more diverse pool of entrepreneurs. But before we dive into all of this, I would love to quickly ask each of our panelists to introduce themselves and the work that they do. So please welcome Shyla, Sean, and Cheryl.
Hey everyone, I can go first here. So my name is Cheryl Campos. I am the head of venture growth and partnerships at Republic. We are a spin of AngelList that allows anyone to invest in startups and for startups to raise up to $1 million. And starting March 15th, $5 million from your community and anyone around the world that believes in your what you're building. And so we've actually grown significantly and have helped over 200 companies now raise over 150 million on the platform, which is just amazing for me, particularly because I joined about 3 years ago and we were just a fledgling startup that really allowed for us to grow. And so we actually lie right in the middle between startup and VC because we have over 1 million people now on our platform that are looking to invest in startups. And so I was part of the investment team for a long time, and then I transitioned into partnerships and been leading the way there. Apart from that, I'm also Lightspeed Scout, so deploying dollars into femtech and silver tech companies, and I'm also an investment partner at the Community Fund, which is a $5 million fund backed by Flybridge that allows for us to invest in community-centric companies. And so I really do have my feet in both the operating and direct investing world. And so that has really given me a unique perspective as to kind of how different institutions operate and how there are definitely some ways for improvement there. So quick background on me. Thank you.
Hi everyone, I'm Shyla Nieves-Burney. I'm the founding and managing partner for Zane Venture Fund. We're raising a $25 million fund to invest in diverse entrepreneurs. I'm also the founding partner for Zane Access, which is our programmatic arm. We have a program that supports capital readiness and student entrepreneurs. So really happy to be here and looking forward to diving into this conversation.
I'm Sean Mendy. I'm a co-founder and partner at Concrete Rose Capital. We invest in early stage companies with underrepresented founders, the founders that are building products and services to meet the needs of underrepresented consumers, and finally, non-underrepresented founders that are committed to building diverse teams and inclusive company cultures. We also make grants through our community foundation to organizations that are strengthening and expanding the leaky underrepresented talent pipeline. And then in addition to my work at Concrete Rose, I'm an advisor to Sixth Street Partners and Next Play Ventures.
Amazing. Thank you all. So I want to start this conversation by going over some of the numbers from the last few years in venture capital. So in 2019, startups raised over $136 billion, which was nearly triple the amount invested in 2013. So a huge, huge jump. And then just last year, despite there being a pandemic and an economic recession, startups actually broke previous records and raised a staggering $156 billion. So there's no shortage of money to go around, but by and large, that money overwhelmingly gets spent on founders who are male and white, and by a very large margin come from a specific educational background and who live in the Bay Area. I think the most surprising thing for me about this new report from Diversity VC and RateMyInvestor is not just how low the numbers are for founders of color, but in fact, how little those numbers have changed over time. So I want to start by asking you each, what is the responsibility of investors to change that? And what are the roadblocks that are standing in the way of investors to start making real change on those numbers around who gets funding?
I'm happy to go first.
Please.
So I think a couple of things that need to change. First of all, there's still a lot of bias in VC, right? So there is still this sort of idea that there is not enough talent in the pipeline, or there's not enough quality deals in the pipeline. And so thereby, we're going to continue investing in these same types of entrepreneurs, which is typically white males. And so I think First of all, I think LPs need to check their GPs a little bit closer and look at the data on who they're investing in, and that'll definitely tell them the story if the LP is actually interested in moving the needle on around diversity, because I think that's another side of the coin that we're not looking at. And I'll just give you an example. We had a call with an LP today, an institutional LP who was drilling us on our data around investing in Black and Latinx entrepreneurs. And I think that's what's important. Ask the questions of your GPs, your fund managers. Peel back the layer and look at their data and see what they're doing. And so that's one way. And I think the other way is that, first of all, the data, there's empirical data that shows that these diverse entrepreneurs perform well, even with less. So imagine investing in them and seeing what they can do once they are invested in. And so I think it's taking that risk. Take the risk on these diverse entrepreneurs and watch them work. And I think once we start seeing more of the risk being taken, I think we'll start seeing some changed minds about how, who to invest in. But if folks are still looking at one particular archetype, we're going to continue to have the same problem. And so I think that's some of the issue is like the mind of who is an entrepreneur and who can be successful as an entrepreneur definitely needs to change. And people just need to start looking elsewhere instead of into the same type of entrepreneur.
I think Shala is exactly right that confirmation bias definitely plays a role in why there's been kind of lagging progress in this area. I think homogenous networks are also a problem. But I think, the real issue is that this is a 400-year problem where we're attempting to correct 400 years of compounded inequality. And it's going to take multiple cycles to really drive significant measurable change. So I'm discouraged by it. I'm also hopeful by a lot of the initiatives that have been launched, especially over the past 6 months. And I think we just lacked a sustained, aggressive, and strategic effort towards addressing these issues. And I think, I'm hopeful that we're on the verge of seeing that happen. I'm seeing both incumbents, like folks who have been kind of market leaders as investors, trying some really interesting things and making some deeper commitments. Like one that comes to mind is the Greylock MLT partnership, which is multidimensional. It involves investing directly in MLT alumni. It involves, placing MLT alumni at Greylock companies. It involves training up, diverse, or underrepresented professionals as investors at Greylock. So I'm really encouraged by that. I think some of the major tech companies like, Google have committed significant resources to underrepresented investors and entrepreneurs. Apple had some great announcements last week. PayPal is doing the same thing. So I see the incumbents are doing, some thoughtful, strategic, aggressive, initiative. They're launching initiatives that I think are going to be effective. And then I think it's also the responsibility of some of the, of all of the emerging managers, all the emerging leaders, to be extremely intentional in how they're building their firms and doing business themselves. So, for us at Concrete Rose, we were super intentional about creating a diverse network that we're sourcing from, that we're partnering with, that we're leveraging to help our companies be successful. We've got, Reid Hoffman as a part of our network. We've also got Mike Tubbs, the mayor of Stockton. We've got Rhonda, from Dev Color, and Brandon Nicholson from Hidden Genius. And then, Teresa Gao with Excel and is now at Acru Capital. It's very interesting. The rooms are now virtual. It would have been, over the past year, they've been virtual, but it's very interesting getting those types of folks into rooms together because social networks bleed into professional networks. You end up doing business with the people that you spend time with. And so I think as funds like Zane, as institutions like Republic continue to mature, as Concrete Rose matures, we've got to continue to be relentless in ensuring that we don't build homogenous networks, that we build inclusive, heterogeneous networks that are leveraging, the full talent that's out there. And then those incumbents, so somebody in the comments is saying commitments come and go. It's got to be sustained. And I can't say what's going to happen with some of these incumbents, but in becoming closer to them and seeing what they're actually committing to, I am more hopeful.
Yeah. Just my 2 cents here is that I think people don't realize that VC is kind of the most emotional of all of kind of the investments that I've seen. I've been in banking and private equity, and now seeing venture capital. It's all about how you feel about other investors, and how you're feeling even about that day when you talk to a company, right? I've definitely seen deals where I've just kind of like lost interest, even though there were things about it that just would have been a great fit 2 weeks ago, right? And that's because we're human, but we have to really understand too that we all have to be mindful of our biases. We have to be mindful of kind of what everyone else has touched. And so to that end, I'm hopeful of structural change, right? And that's why I joined Republic and took a pay cut about 3 years ago. It was literally because it was cutting edge and it had a legal defensible moat, but it also was revolutionizing the finance industry through democratizing access, where it's not just for all investors to come in and just decide, yes, no, this gets funded, but anyone around the world can say, I believe in this, I'm going to invest in it, right? Like that in itself, I think it's important, and it shows through our numbers, right? 40% of our founders are women, and 20% are Black and Latinx. Where do you get, like, compared to traditional VC, that just blows everything else out of the water, right? And so I will, however, say that we have been moving upstream, given how there's more and more founders, more and more investors on the platform. They want more traction for companies. And so we are getting kind of pressure from our investor base to give them larger and larger companies. But that means that generally those companies are led by a homogenous group. And so I'm actually personally being very mindful as to what we're doing to make sure that we're continuing to support underrepresented founders who might be on the earlier stage, and at the same time, have a balance between the two. And so that's, to me, something to be mindful of internally, because I've had fights about this, and I've been very staunch in my opinion that if we're not delivering on what we talked about democratizing access on the investing side, but also the fundraising side, then we're not doing our job, right? And that's not the reason why I joined. And so I think this also ties into the people who are in these institutions, right? The investors themselves, making sure that they are more diverse, like similar to the Graycroft example, right? Making sure that there are more and more underrepresented folks that are in. So we had created a venture fellows and associate program that we're going to do in March, April. We did a pilot already in Q4 last year to bring in more diverse folks from colleges and that are target and non-target, and making sure that MBAs and professionals that are pivoting could actually have a chance in this space. And last but not least, in the community fund, Lolita Taub, who's one of the GPs there, and I feel like a lot of people know her through Twitter, but she was very intentional as to the construction of the investment partners that we have, which are about 10 in the firm. And there were times, like, it's actually half women, half men, and it's also it's half POC, actually mostly POC actually. And so I can definitely see, just even through my Lightspeed experience versus this one, how different we interact with deals, and how do we think about it as a group and a team, so that all of our perspectives are heard through different deals. And so I think the more voices that you have in a room that are diverse, the better.
Absolutely.
You started talking about emotion. I think that made me think of how important leveraging the emotion of FOMO is going to be going forward. And I'm thinking about Sarah Menker and Grow Intelligence last week or the week prior. I don't know what day it is and what month it is in 2021. But
I told someone today, by the way, that it was Wednesday. I was like, sorry guys, happy hump day though. And they were like, it's Thursday. I'm like, oof.
Yeah, that's what the last year has been like. But no, I mean, I think seeing investors react to the B round that she announced last week, and having folks, I've lost count of how many people over the past week have talked about how they wanted access to that. They didn't know, that the deal existed, and they felt like they missed out. And so I think it's also really important for the folks who are, and this is a tax that underrepresented folks have to pay, and it's not fair. But the more that we win, the more folks are going to start being incentivized to change the way they're doing things. It's harder to incentivize somebody to do something that they perceive as being harder if they think they're going to continue to get the results that they want to get without doing it. And so until folks are saying, there's been 3 Black women founders who have built massive companies, and I didn't meet any of them because my network is too male or too white or too whatever. It might not be fair that would be a way to kind of drive change here, but it would definitely get folks' attention. People don't like missing out.
Yeah. So it sounds like there is sort of, before you can solve the problem, you need to show that there are enough successful, diverse founders in successful companies.
I think that's one angle that should be pushed. It should not fall, like the burden should not fall on the oppressed to fix the system. But I do believe that would be effective. I'm watching it be effective, and I'm seeing, Squire, I'm seeing all these Black founder-led companies starting to gain traction, and people are starting to ask more questions about why they're not meeting these folks and why these folks don't want to take money from them when they do.
Yeah, it makes me wonder, should diversity be included as a portfolio metric? Is this something that you think we should be including along with other things we're measuring in funds and portfolios? And if so, what kind of diversity matters?
Yeah, I could go first here. At this point, it's 2021. Sorry, right? Like, sorry, 2020 part 2. And so, for me, I definitely think diversity at this point should be, to Sheila's point, more and more folks are asking for what the composition is. And I think just even being, that is a positive right now, to track that. And I think in the future it'll just be a requirement, right? And so, like, you are ahead of the curve and you are being mindful now, because it's not just like, okay, we're going to commit and then things are going to change immediately. It's a slow process, right? And it just takes time. So the earlier that folks can track, the better they can see how much they've been lacking, and if anything, or if they've been lacking, or maybe they're not, right? Maybe they've actually been doing well, just, and so how can they be better is always something to ask on that side. Those are my 2 cents, at least on the tracking thing.
I was going to say, I definitely agree, and again, after being pushed this morning, knowing I'm already, first of all, I'm an underrepresented fund manager, and I'm looking at underrepresented fund managers, and then to have an LP, sort of push me on it. And of course we are, right? But I think once it becomes very important to the LP community, the limited partner community, it will definitely be important to the VC community. And so I'm thinking change happens at the very, very top, right? We're driven by funding from limited partners. If those limited partners are really interested in what we're investing in and wanting to take a look at what we're investing in, I think the change will definitely start to happen. But if you get a free ride and no one is ever questioning why you keep investing in the same type of entrepreneur, you're not getting better returns because you are, but you're going to keep going down that road. There's a fiduciary responsibility on all of us to make sure we're getting into the best deals possible. And so, and if diverse entrepreneurs are proving themselves, but we're still going to go with the same archetype of a straight white male, we have a problem. So I think if we start measuring it and start asking the questions, yes, I think change will start to happen. And I think we do need, a metric around diversity. To be very honest, I was a little bit put off because most diverse fund managers are automatically going to be thinking about diverse entrepreneurs. It's innate, it's in us to do that. And so what we need other folks to do is kind of change their mind. Now, it doesn't mean I can't look at a white company, a white entrepreneur as well, but I also am able to look across the spectrum of entrepreneurs, whereas a lot of these funds have been focused on one. And that's where we need to make the change. And I think having them sort of tell us what you've been investing, show us what you've been investing in, people will start to make change. And I've seen a lot of chatter on this on Twitter asking for that to happen because they believe that it will lead to change.
Yeah, I think more LPs are asking about it. And then I also just think if you're serious about, driving superior returns, you should be looking at the diversity of your portfolio in multiple ways. certainly in terms of underrepresented professionals, both racially and gender, and to some of the points that have been previously made, as underrepresented GPs ourselves, we've done 20 deals, and 15 of the founders that we've backed have been racially underrepresented. I'm not sure if it's more or less in terms of gender, but it's comparable. And that was not because we set a quota or have a mandate on, to invest in underrepresented founders. It's just that's who's in our network. That's who we met. Those are the most interesting opportunities we've seen. So I think, and I also just think that the way that demographic shifts are happening, the way that the world is evolving and advancing, good investors are looking at the opportunities. Like, you're going to see more TAM if you're able to look at the world through more, diverse perspectives. And then we also think about diversity beyond the founder level, right? Like, how diverse are the companies, are the teams of the companies that we're investing in, and how diverse are the cap tables? What kind of perspectives do you have around the table advising the CEO? And then I also think, the best founders, underrepresented or not, want to be working with investors who have, a diverse set of professionals or diverse set of founders that they're working with, because they want intersectional perspectives from their peers. And so they don't want to, I've had more and more white founders make room for us on their cap table, or, seek us out as investors because they want, that diversity on the cap table. And I think that's going to be a continuing trend. I think Gen Z is definitely not looking at the world in the same way as the baby boomer generation did. And if you're not, if your portfolio is homogenous, founders are going to be put off. They're not going to want to work with you.
Yeah, I mean, and there's plenty of data, and has been for a long time, to suggest that diverse teams improve returns. Like, there's one study I found recently that found that founders where there was more than one gender or ethnicity represented on the founding team had 30% higher multiples on invested capital. So there is a sense, I think, that self-interest can drive progress here, or at least should.
Our job is to make money for our LPs, and so yep. This isn't altruistic. This is right. This is certainly self-interested, and then I think I'm interested. I haven't seen any studies on this yet, and I hope to someday. But it's something that we think about very intentionally at Concrete Rose. Is what other types of diversity are we thinking about? So socioeconomic, immigration status, first generation, professional experience. How many intersectional, perspectives are you getting around the table at your company? At the end of the day, we are focused on race because we believe that solving racism solves a lot of other isms. And you have to kind of ruthlessly prioritize. But those are, I had a conversation with a founder last week who was talking about her experience as a nanny when she was in college, and she was talking about it from the perspective of she was telling me how she viewed it as like an ops role and a sales role, having two toddlers running around while trying to make them lunch and negotiate with them and get them to eat. And like the way that she described that experience, it was she talked about it like she had been running a company. And I think the confirmation bias, or the bias that Shiloh talked about earlier in the chat or in this talk, we have to be looking at things like that. Like, it can't just be like, did you work at Google? And so the more that we can create a framework to look at entrepreneurs through all these different angles, the better.
I want to add in, if I could. So part of what we did is I made sure my entire team is diverse, right? So we have folks who are LGBTQ, it runs a gamut lived experience. I don't have the lived experience of an old white man. So I have an older white man who's really been my advisor and mentor for the entire time I've been in VC. He's at the table because he brings a different perspective when we're looking at companies. And so I think you're right, Sean, diversity of, like, we can't just look at race and gender. That's a big and huge part of it, but there are other factors of diversity that we should also, when you say inclusive, that's exactly what you're talking about, making sure there's folks around the table that have, different sort of perspectives than your own. And so we have been very intentional about who we have as our advisor, because these are the folks who are going to be working with our portfolio companies. So we don't need them to bring their own biases into that relationship. And so for us, we need to make sure that whoever is working with us are also, our companies will also be comfortable working with them. And so that's important to us as well.
Inclusivity within the companies. Do they have inclusive cultures? Are they going to be able to retain diverse talent once they actually hire it? It's worse to have a company that successfully recruits, Black or women engineers and then loses them, right?
Right.
That's demoralizing for the rest of your team as well.
Exactly, and that's why we say diverse teams, diverse entrepreneurs and teams. The teams part is very, very important for us.
Yeah, I think that's so important. We have just about 10 minutes for conversation, and then we'll kick it off to Q&A. Thank you to everyone who's participating in the chat and throwing in questions. I am very excited to see what you guys bring in about 10 minutes. But I wanted to sort of try to end our conversation on a more optimistic note, and ask you who is really doing well right now, who can be a sort of model in nurturing this ecosystem. What are first steps that investors who are eager to diversify their investments but haven't had much success so far, what are first steps they can take? Where are the models that they can look toward? And sort of who do we want to shine a light on that's really doing a good job right now?
So I can only speak to what I've seen, so everyone else feel free to come through. I'd say one, I think is just take a look inside and just say, where are you lacking? Like, is it like the fact that you don't have enough connections with other folks that are potentially diverse, or that you do, but you just don't make any effort or like actually leverage those relationships in order to actually then go and support founders? Or maybe you've supported founders in the past that are diverse, but then you just haven't really cared for them. You have to be really honest with yourself, and this is why like all this transparency is key, right? Like Republic does a really good job with diversity. The community fund, actually, the majority of our investments have been also to POC and to women. My personal investments through Lightspeed have all been to Black and female founders. And so I think just one, being honest with yourself and saying, okay, where am I missing things, and then what can I do to whether it's a pipeline problem, whether it's an investment process problem, whether it's a portfolio company problem, you have to really detect, are you just failing at all three, or you just need to support? And then if it's more of a pipeline thing, I'd say definitely one, listen to and actually takes seriously other investors and investors of color and founders, like, because if they, you're talking to them and you just don't actually engage past an initial call just to show up and just say like, hey, like, I think there's been a lot of performance kind of diversity things that have been going on, and so they'll maybe like sponsor something, or they'll maybe do one thing and then they'll call it a day. And so I'd say take those calls seriously, engage with amazing groups like the Diversity VC. Black VC has been doing an amazing job. I just created something called VC Familia, which is an amazing community of Latinx VCs that we're growing slowly but surely, and it's focused on especially engaging the new kind of groups of Latinx VCs that generally, like when I joined VC, all I had to do was like profile names, and I was like, okay, so she's Gomez, just like maybe she's like Latino, I can reach out to her. And so like I don't ever want that to be the case, when you join a new space. And so like we're actually trying to build that familia that I think is pretty awesome. And then really making sure that you are broadening your horizons and just once again tracking kind of how is it going through your deal flow and everything like that. So even though, like, for example, the community fund, we have 10 people, it's our deal flow also comes in cold, and we have tracked kind of where everything has come and kind of where have they fallen along the deal flow kind of pipeline and who we've invested in. We can still do a better job in terms of making sure that some of some diverse founders don't get lost along the way, and we continue to broaden that top of funnel.
I've got a short answer. It's the folks who are writing checks and hiring people. One thing that doesn't discourage me, because I actually respect it, but there are a lot of folks who are doing things very quietly. I've convinced some folks to give me permission to out them. Josh Koppelman at First Round has invested in, I think, at least half a dozen, emerging managers. He was doing this prior to, last June. I mentioned Greylock, I mentioned Alphabet, I mentioned, a lot of the folks, the three institutions that I'm, officially affiliated with, obviously, I feel are doing a good job. There's a ton of emerging managers who are, writing checks into, diverse founders. And so I think there's a lot of great things happening, but at the end of the day, it comes down to, you can talk all you want. Are you writing checks and are you hiring people and empowering them? Even, like the program at Lightspeed that Cheryl, that you're talking about, participating as a scout, like the fact that they had Mercedes just own that program and bring in 50, I think it's 50 underrepresented, or significant number of underrepresented, emerging investors is like, those are the kind of things that need to happen. And even that, like, they're not talking about that too much. I think do the work, talk about it less.
Yeah, actually, +1 on Josh, because I don't know if anybody knows Alejandro Guerrero. He's actually now a GP at Act One, and he's definitely one of those, real G's moving silence type person, but he actually did a diversity rider that is actually like legal language in a term sheet to make sure that, there are diverse folks on the cap table. And so Josh was actually one of the first to agree with that. And that's
Josh gets that, and I think there's some initiatives that have been criticized. I'm not one to, like, anybody who's actually trying things and doing things. Again, we said at the top, we're addressing 400 years of compounded inequality. It's going to take, thousands of initiatives, thousands of activities for us to actually, fix this. And so I'm not knocking anything. Josh is somebody who you call him with an idea, he's going to do it. Because I think he believes also he doesn't know what's going to be the one thing that works. It's not going to be one thing. It's going to be all these things.
So I wanted the person who, I think there are a lot of folks who are doing some great work, and to both Cheryl and Sean's point, some of them are moving in silence, and I love those people who do. I'm not that person, but so for me, I think one person in particular I want to shout out is Ed Zimmerman. He's my attorney at Lowenstein, and Ed has taken on the responsibility of investing in underrepresented managers, and he has now they have a fund called First Class Partners to do that very same thing. And he's always, on Twitter shouting out to the masses about, the fact that these folks are not getting invested in. And so I really appreciate him. He has a program called Venture Crush where folks can come in and learn about different, programs or folks in the industry and that sort of stuff. So I really want to shout him out. And I'm not going to sit here and be pious and not mention about what we're doing, right? So, we came in here totally unknown. No one knew me in this space. I came from education and nonprofits, but I saw a problem and dug deep and tried and now have tried to solve it. And so we not only have the fund, we realized at a certain point, entrepreneurs needed some programs to set them up for success. So we created a capital readiness program and took 15 companies through it. We haven't closed our fund. We haven't even had our first close yet, but it's important for us to be entrenched into the entrepreneurial ecosystem. We went a bit further because we realized that diverse entrepreneurs are also on university campuses with no sort of assistance. They can't get in some of these programs because these programs are extremely competitive. And so I decided, we need to solve around that too. Let's get in earlier in the pipeline and create Zane Access University for student entrepreneurs. And then I continue to be inundated with young people who are interested in working VC. They can't get an answer back from some of these large funds or even some of the mid-sized funds. And so we created a program called Scholars in Residence, where young university students, MBAs, or getting their master's degree, can come and work with us and see what it's really like in a startup VC fund who has a programmatic arm. And they get all of this exposure to not only us, but then the folks who are leading these initiatives or in the industry. And so we pride ourselves that we created an entire ecosystem and built it for diverse entrepreneurs in the Southeast and any other entrepreneur virtually who wants to join our programs. It's big for us. Sure, we have a footprint in a certain area, but I cut my teeth in New York learning from entrepreneurs who embraced me, and so I felt like wherever we can find a good deal, let's go there. Let Zane be somewhere in it if we can. And so, I feel like we made in just 2 years, we made a tremendous, well, just a year, because we started in 2019 and 2020 we all know. But just in that shorter period of time, we've been able to do amazing work, graduate 15 companies who got capital before they even left our program. We're still helping those companies, even though they're not, we still consider them to be in our care, even though they're not in the program. We're still helping them get funded. And so it's like, we don't want to leave any entrepreneur behind. That is our mantra internally. If we may not invest in you, but we're going to find someone else who will. And so I think for us, I'm going to give us a pat on the back, and the people who come along with me to get this work done at rapid pace. And then, the entrepreneurial community who believe in us and will, they come in and are interested in working with us. That's highly, highly important.
I absolutely love these points. So one is sort of getting entrepreneurs earlier in the process. We know that founders of color have a harder time raising their seed rounds. They have a harder time getting that initial funding. So getting them early, even as early as college. Cheryl, I love your point about being really honest, which includes taking data. If you have a pipeline problem, figure out where that pipeline is leaking and then be really honest about how you fix it. And then Sean, your point, which is that eventually investors just have to do the work. You have to make the hire, you have to send the wire, you have to write the check, because otherwise, it's the same old status quo. We have a hot Q&A coming up right now. I'm going to kick it over to some of our attendees who have been furiously chatting and asking questions in the Q&A module. And panelists, I will let you answer those as you see fit.
Great, thanks, Ariel. I've sent notes to a couple of folks who asked questions. Kanan, I think you were first. I'm going to unmute you, but if we don't hear from you, I'll ask your question out loud. You are
super cool. Hola, Choa. Hello. My question is, you really did answer it a little bit before, but I'd like to hear a little bit more on what signals you guys are looking for, you may have looked for. What signals have you seen when trying to break away from perpetuating these historically homogenous networks and patterns? If that was clear, I hope. Thank you.
Yeah, we're looking for, evidence of resilience and grit, demonstrated ability to make things happen, proximity or, to the issue that they're trying to address, or, expertise on the problem area that they're focused on. And that doesn't have to look like, demonstrated ability to get things done doesn't need to mean you've had a previous startup that you founded and sold, right? It can mean you graduated from college while dealing with some significant, challenges, or paid your way through it yourself, or you ran a family business, or, I literally gave an example of somebody talking about being a nanny while they were in college, and that was real. There was something tangible there that we could take away from how is this person going to actually run a company. Those are some of the things that we look for.
Yeah, I will mention though, by the way, and people, I think people don't stress this enough, that we see so many deals at this point that we can't tell that just from seeing the deck, right? Or from that initial intro email that we get, or from a warm intro, or anywhere. It has to stand on its own, what you're presenting, right? And sometimes we don't have time to dig deep either. Like, it's really, I think really getting your pitch down and showing what that investor that you're reaching out to, what they want to see, I think is key, so that then you can have the conversation, get on the phone, and then we can kind of assess that further, right? Like, we have to have a good impression of you just even going in, and then getting out of that call.
Yeah, the table stakes, can this even be a venture scalable business?
Exactly. Like,
is there a market there? Is there, yes,
but it has to be in the pitch. And so sometimes I sometimes hear founders who are just like, oh, they didn't even give me a chance. But it's like, well, you gotta have all the stuff. And by the way, I'll also reach out to the right investors too, because the amount of, like, I literally have it in my Twitter bio. It's like, I invest in femtech, silvertech, and overlooked communities. You can send me anything around that, like, cool. If you don't, like, it's out of my wheelhouse. I'm sorry, like, So, but I'll try to support the best way I can, whether it's sending to others or figuring that out. So, just wanted to keep that in mind.
And I just want to say, for me, I love problem solvers, right? Somebody who found an issue, it could have been personal or some other way, and then they decided to solve around it. And for me, it's why you and why now? Like, that's really, really important. And can you see this all the way through? Of course, we're always looking for an innovative idea, and so that's a part of it. And then, of course, the size market share, your size of the market share that you're attempting to solve around. So those are things that are important to us. To Cheryl's point, we're not going to see all of that by looking at a deck, and sometimes if we don't see it, there's a pass trying to dig through so many decks. And for us, we're in, like I'm sure with everybody, we're inundated with potential entrepreneurs, and what I send them to is straight to the website. We've had a straight white male team come to us, and it's like, did you read our criteria? And so I send them back to the website. I don't hurt their feelings or anything like that, but I say, please visit our website, please see our criteria, and then submit your company's information. So it's really important for entrepreneurs to research as well. It goes both ways. When I'm looking at investments, I'm looking at your thing and researching what you're doing. Research your investors and make sure you're targeting the right investor. To Cheryl's point, she has specific areas that she's invested in, and it's a hard pass if you're not in one of those particular industries. And so do that sort of research for yourself. It's important.
Thank you so much. I just want to say, I recognize that it is so difficult, and that's why I was interested in how we're starting to narrow down what signals may possibly indicate or how that's happening and being viewed from y'all's level. Thank you so very much.
Great, thank you. Next up, we have Steve. Give me 1 second here. Steve Vilkas, you are up.
Hey, everybody. Thank you so much for taking my question. So yeah, I'm a connector. I'm all over VC Twitter. And one of the things I'm noticing is that one of the most common threads is on community building. VCs are wanting to know how to build better community. Founders are wanting to know how to, build better community. And to me, it's a burning question. And it's like, what are some of the things that we can do to make sure that when we're building community, we're doing so intentionally with an eye towards like actually cultivating authentic diversity? Like, is it listening more, like education? Is it, looking at ourselves, like doing some self-reflection? So yeah, I just wanted to put that out there. And again, thank you so much for taking my question.
I'm just going to say this really quickly. Sometimes it's just a matter of look at who's around you, right? Look at the table that you're sitting at and the folks who are sitting there with you. If everybody is alike, everybody is thinking alike, then that's a problem. And that's when you can start to, in my opinion, start to make change. I'll give you an example of right when George Floyd was killed. There was a lot of chatter on Twitter, people going back and forth with each other. And one young white man jumped into the conversation and really got torn to pieces because he really didn't understand. And nobody wanted to explain it to explain to him why he was wrong. And so I said, I'll talk to you. There is a mind that we don't want to have to keep teaching people how to behave and how to, not be, I don't want to say racist or anything like that, but I took the time to talk to him because I felt like he was sincere. He really, really wanted to know how could he be more of an advocate or an ally or an accomplice in this time. And so I had a great conversation with him. Sometimes it's just that simple, but just understand not everybody's going to be open to teaching folks about how to be more inclusive. For some of us, it's innate. It's been my life. I've been the onlys, the first, all of that sort of stuff. So so I've made a point to bring people together of different, like mind or different minds or whatever. And so I think it's incumbent of you to probably do the same thing. Think about who's already in your circle, maybe bringing them in closer so that you can at least start, building that inclusive relationship inclusive community that you really, really want.
Cheryl, you're part of the community fund, so I think you got to have some ideas here.
Yeah, I mean, to be honest, I don't know if that's just me, but the question was kind of vague because it's both on the investor side and the founder side, right? I just think that we're all moving towards different types of communities, and as communities, like, two things I'd say here. One is that as technologies converge, as there's less and less differentiation between companies, community is going to be key as to how companies prevail, right? Which is why the community fund is kind of has an edge now, but I think in the future every single thing will have a community around it, right? And so that's, I think, something that we look for is intentionality at the beginning of when a company is being built, because that means that it's authentic. You build relationships, you understand your customer, and you can have your customer in mind every step of the way, right? Sorry, my mom, FYI, if you hear a noise, apologies. But the second thing I'd say here is because everything's moving towards community is getting fragmented. And I think that because of that, there's going to be more and more niche communities every step of the way. And so I'd say is to really join forces with as many communities that are trying to accomplish the same thing, because VC Familia, like we say, la unión hace la fuerza, right? Like together we can, right? There's power in numbers, similar to like the Republic model where like drops fill the bucket, right? You can invest in a company as little as $50, right? And so I personally think that the more you can come together and collaborate and try to align towards the same goal, the better. So those are my two kind of views on community there.
Yeah, the only thing I would add is in terms of building, a diverse community, you don't want to, sacrifice diversity for speed. I mean, I think it's a balancing act. You do need to move fast, especially when building a company. But I've had some folks who have built some of the most significant companies in the world today say that they could have been more intentional on the diversity side early on, and they use the excuse of, oh, I just had to fill that engineering seat so the company could survive, or we could meet our KPIs and keep this thing growing. And upon reflecting, they said, we could have, like, what would 1 week have really cost us at that time? And I think I talked about it earlier, especially as these new institutions are kind of growing into their own, being very intentional about who's being recruited to the conversation is important. It's going to lead to better outcomes.
Awesome. Thanks, Sean. Next up, we have Deborah. Deborah, I'm going to put your microphone on, so feel free to ask away.
Hey, thanks for taking my question. So I am a co-founder of BeyondTheRunway.com, and we're working in tech, solving how to find your best fit online. It seems pretty simple, right? So I'm a Black woman. My co-founder is a white woman, and I found in the last 6 months or so, we've gotten some really great VC meetings. I mean, everyone from Silicon Valley to some top VC firms in New York. But as I get deeper into this, as the POC in the relationship, I'm realizing, yeah, we need the money. We really do, for us to iterate and for us to get to our next platform built. But we really want that lead investor to be diverse. And it's getting kind of tough right now because we've gotten offers and we've seen different things, but none of those have been from the kind of fit that we feel like we want in our ethos as a company. And so, believe it or not, being a new entrepreneur, this kind of forum that we're in this morning, this afternoon, this is completely new to me. Like, I've not been in this diverse of a discussion with people that have the power and the investment power since I started this business. So my question is how to get in communities like this more frequently. Yes, I'm personally looking for investment, but more importantly, being in communities like this and proliferating that discussion is important for the long term than just getting a check written. So I don't know if that makes any sense, but this whole discussion has been like mind-blowing for me because I've been in a lot of hot seats, a lot of really high pressure meetings with people that have a lot of say, but like nothing like this. And this is what I want more of. Even before we take our first lead investor, this is what I want more of.
Yeah, so actually, wait, Sean, you can go first since you are.
I was going to say, Deborah, let's connect, and then I'm actually going to connect you with somebody else who's actually on the call, Teak Chapa. He's an MBA at Booth right now, but he's maybe the most connected to founders and investors in venture, despite not being not being an investor yet. So
He is though.
I'll take that.
He's
Are you writing checks now, T?
at a VC firm right now, so he's out here.
He is at a VC firm right now. You're right. But he went back to school, which I was trying to discourage him from doing.
Right.
Anyways, you need to meet T Chopper. Was all I was gonna say.
Exactly. So that's key. I'd say too. Just getting more diverse check writers, I think, is a huge part of the game. I'd give you an example too, because I've been here like not that long, right, 2-3 years, but still, like I as a Latina referred a Latino scout for a Latino founder who, by the way, had all the pedigree, like all pedigree was Latino, right? All the pedigrees you could have checked, right, in terms of everything else, if he'd just been, more of the standard, he would have been golden. But he was Latino, and literally no one wanted to take a shot on him because, I mean, I don't want to point names, but like the reasoning he was getting wasn't normal, and so actually there was a Latino GP who actually ended up leading his round. And I think to that extent, like, yeah, it was the first time I've ever seen like this whole chain of Latinos supporting other Latinos and getting this Latino deal done. And like, I was just shocked. And so the fact that this is the first time I've seen it means that that's good, that's progress. But it's also like the fact that it's the first time is just like, wow to me, right? This should have been happening a long time ago. And I think that it's not just up to us to like come together, which is what we're doing with VC Community and stuff, but it's also like, this shouldn't have to happen if only the structure was the same. So was, better and more diverse. So definitely trying to congregate more, make sure that we're supporting each other and kind of going from there.
So it's sort of a tricky one, because I almost want to say, take the money to get started and then continue, hopefully getting you some diverse fund managers. But I don't think that's the answer you want to hear. So I'll just give you an example of what I had to do. There was and we have not closed our fund yet. We have made some investments. We had a young woman who we had been mentoring for a year. She had an IoT company. She was ready to scale. She did some pivoting during COVID, and we got really excited about her. But because I hadn't closed, I had to find, my goal was to get her funded regardless. And so I did send her to a fund ran by, it's a white couple here in Atlanta, but their focus is on diversity. That's why I sent them. And she immediately got a term sheet. And then that investor started her, getting the rest of the round filled. And so I had to go through the back door in order to get her funded, because I wasn't, we weren't ready to be writing checks yet. But as soon as we actually just took some personal money and made an investment in her company, because we did not want to lose an opportunity that we had really worked hard on getting her to, helping her with strategy and that sort of stuff. And then once she was ready to be, looking for capital, I had to send her to, a white male peer. But unfortunately, that's how this particular deal had to happen. But for you, I would say we're here. There are a lot of us around. I don't know if you're on Twitter or not. We're always there talking, sharing information back and forth. Cheryl said earlier about Lolita Todd. If you're not following her, you should do that today or now when we get through with this, because she is one of the most connected folks on Twitter who are helping entrepreneurs find their way. So I would definitely follow her. And then you'll be able to see the rest of us who are sort of connected with her, who are looking for diverse entrepreneurs. For us, you're welcome to come to us. You can go to Zane.vc. We have a portal you can add your information on, and we're happy to take a look. But I want you to know that we are out there and we are making noise. And so, don't think that this is the only type of forums. This is one of many conversations that are happening around diverse entrepreneurs and getting you guys funded so you can scale your company when you're ready.
Shaila, I think that's absolutely the perfect note to end on, because we do unfortunately have to wrap this. But it's an important point, which is that when this panel ends in about 60 seconds, it doesn't mean the conversation will end. I so appreciate the knowledge share from you three and from our very active audience, and I hope that these conversations continue on Twitter, over email, in person, and that this time next year, when we have another report on the state of startups, that we see some different numbers and we start to see some of these strategies coming to fruition. But Cheryl, Shaila, Sean, thank you so much for sharing all of your insights, your advice, and I hope we can all continue this on the interwebs.
Yep. Thanks so much. It was great.
Thank you, guys. Please connect, DM. My Twitter DMs are a little bit of a mess, but I'm getting to them this weekend. So thank you, guys. Appreciate you all, and have a wonderful day.
Bye all.
Thanks, everybody.